Between 1503 and 1660, Spain became the richest empire in human history. Mountains of gold flowed from conquered Aztec and Inca kingdoms. Silver mines in the Americas produced wealth beyond imagination. 200 tons of pure silver every single year from Potosí alone. Millions upon millions of gold pesos crossed the Atlantic on Spanish galleons, filling the royal treasury in Seville until it overflowed. Spain controlled the Netherlands, Naples, Milan, Sicily, the entire New World from California to Argentina, the Philippines. The Spanish navy defeated the Ottoman Empire at Lepanto. Spanish armies were the most feared fighting force in Europe. Philip II ruled an empire where the sun never set. And in those same 157 years, Spain declared bankruptcy 4 times. 4 complete economic collapses in less than 6 decades. Not from losing wars, not from plague or famine, from being too rich. Here's the paradox that destroyed them. The more treasure Spain extracted from the Americas, the faster Spain's economy rotted from the inside. Every gold ingot that arrived in Seville made Spain weaker. Every silver convoy made the collapse more inevitable. The treasure didn't save Spain. The treasure poisoned Spain. This isn't a morality tale about greed. This is economic mechanics. Cold, mathematical, and brutal. Spain didn't mismanage their wealth. The wealth itself was the weapon that killed them. And they never saw it coming. Because here's what should terrify you about the Spanish Empire. They followed a 4-stage pattern of economic suicide. Each stage seemed rational at the time. Each decision appeared logical. But together, they created a death spiral that couldn't be stopped. Let me show you exactly how treasure became poison, and why Spain became a delivery service for their own gold. 1503. The first Spanish galleon returns from the Americas. On the docks of Seville, wooden crates are unloaded, pried open, and inside, gold. Not coins, solid artifacts. Aztec masks, ceremonial breastplates, golden figurines of gods the Spanish don't recognize and don't care about. It all gets melted down, turned into bars, weighed, recorded, sent to the royal treasury. This is just the beginning. 1519. Hernán Cortés walks into Montezuma's palace in Tenochtitlan and finds a room filled with gold. Not a chest, a room. Walls lined with golden shields. Headdresses woven with gold thread. Solid gold jewelry stacked in piles. The Aztec Empire's accumulated wealth from centuries of tribute and trade. Cortés melts it all. Every artifact, every piece of history, turned into 162,000 gold pesos and shipped back to Spain. 1532. Francisco Pizarro captures Atahualpa, the Inca emperor. The ransom demand is simple. Fill this room with gold, once, to the height of a man's reach. The room measures 22 feet long by 17 feet wide. Atahualpa's subjects bring gold from across the Inca Empire. They fill it 7 feet high. Pizarro melts it down. 13,420 pounds of pure gold, plus 26,000 pounds of silver. Atahualpa is executed anyway. The treasure goes to Spain. Then 1545. The discovery that changes everything. Potosí, a mountain in present-day Bolivia. But not just any mountain. The richest silver deposit ever found in human history. A mountain that's almost pure silver ore. Within a decade, 45,000 workers are extracting silver from Potosí. African slaves. Indigenous laborers in conditions that kill thousands. The silver flows out in tons. 200 tons annually. Then 300 tons. By the 1590s, Potosí alone produces 270 tons of silver every single year. The numbers become absurd. Between 1503 and 1540, Spain receives 185,000 kilograms of gold. Between 1540 and 1560, that doubles. Then doubles again. The treasure fleets arrive like clockwork. Twice per year, armed galleons loaded with silver bars and gold ingots crossing the Atlantic. And here's where stage 1 begins. The production collapse. Spanish textile workers in Segovia look at their wages and look at the price of imported French cloth. Why weave when you can buy? In 1580, Segovia has 13,000 textile workers. By 1600, that number is 6,000. Spanish farmers watch grain prices and do the math. Why grow wheat when French wheat costs less? Even after shipping, because Spanish prices are rising. Spanish shipbuilders in Seville can't compete with Dutch shipyards. Spanish weapon makers lose contracts to German manufacturers. The work moves elsewhere. And why shouldn't it? Spain has silver. Mountains of it. Literally, mountains. Every convoy brings more wealth than most kingdoms see in a decade. Why produce anything when you can buy everything? Spain is getting richer on paper, but its economy is rotting from inside, and the treasure ships keep coming. By 1570, Spain is flooded with silver. Treasure fleets arrive in Seville harbour twice a year, disgorging tons of silver bars onto the docks. The royal treasury overflows. Spanish nobles drape themselves in silks and jewels. Madrid becomes a city of conspicuous consumption, and prices start climbing. This is stage 2, the price revolution. Between 1500 and 1600, prices in Spain increase by 400%, not over decades in isolation. In a single century, the cost of everything explodes. A fanaga of wheat that cost 400 maravedis in 1500 costs 1,600 maravedis by 1600. Olive oil triples in price. Wool quadruples. Basic food becomes expensive. Housing becomes expensive. Labor becomes expensive. Everything in Spain costs more than it did last year, and more than it will cost next year. Compare this to the rest of Europe. France experiences half Spain's inflation rate. England experiences 1/3. Spain's prices are rising faster than anywhere else on the continent. And here's the mechanism nobody in Madrid understands. Too much silver chasing too few goods. Spain stopped producing, but silver keeps arriving. More money competing for fewer Spanish-made products. The mathematics are brutal. Walk through a Madrid market in 1580. A merchant holds Spanish silver coins that buy less bread than they did 5 years ago. That same silver, if spent in France, buys more. So Spanish merchants start doing exactly that, buying goods in France with Spanish silver, importing them to Spain, selling them for more Spanish silver that has inflated in value. The silver flows out as fast as it flows in. Spain becomes a pass-through, a middleman in its own treasure. Here's the paradox sharpening into a blade. Each treasure fleet that arrives makes Spain poorer. More silver floods the market. Prices rise higher. Spanish goods become less competitive. More production moves to France, to the Netherlands, to German states where costs are lower and inflation is controlled. A Toledo swordsmith in 1580 faces this reality every day. He buys German steel because Spanish steel costs more. He pays his apprentices higher wages because food prices rose again. He sells his finished sword for more silver, but that silver buys less than it did last year. Meanwhile, a German swordsmith produces the same quality blade for half the cost. The Toledo smith raises prices to survive. His customers buy German. He goes bankrupt despite being surrounded by wealth. This is Spain's treasure paradox in practice. The abundance of silver doesn't create prosperity. It creates inflation that destroys competitiveness. The velocity of money becomes Spain's enemy. Silver arrives from the Americas and leaves for Europe in months, sometimes weeks. Spain isn't wealthy. Spain is a toll booth collecting fees on its own treasure. Philip II sits in the Escorial Palace outside Madrid, reviewing accounts, and asks his advisors a question that has no good answer. We receive more silver than any nation in history. We control the richest mines ever discovered. Why can't we afford anything? His economic advisors write reports that Philip doesn't want to believe. One writes plainly, "The abundance of treasure has made Spain poor." Another calculates that Spanish prices are rising 3 times faster than wages. A third points out that Spain imports nearly everything it consumes while exporting only silver, a trade imbalance that can't sustain itself. Philip doesn't listen, can't listen, because Spain is fighting wars everywhere simultaneously. The Netherlands are in open revolt. The Ottoman Empire threatens the Mediterranean. France pushes at the borders, England's privateers raid treasure fleets. The Holy Roman Empire requires constant political maneuvering. Every conflict costs money, enormous amounts of money. And Spain has a solution to insufficient funds that's about to make the inflation catastrophic. The treasure ships keep coming, and Spain's answer to rising prices is to borrow against treasure that hasn't arrived yet. Philip II inherits the throne in 1556, and with it, 20 million ducats of debt. 20 million. Before he makes a single decision, before he fights a single battle, he's already drowning. But Spain has silver mountains in Potosí, treasure fleets crossing the Atlantic twice annually, and an empire that stretches across the known world. Surely debt is manageable when you own the richest mines in human history. This is stage 3, the debt trap. And Philip doesn't just manage the debt, he expands it, because Spain is fighting wars everywhere simultaneously. The Netherlands explode into revolt in 1568, beginning what will become the 80 Years' War. The Ottoman Empire controls the eastern Mediterranean and threatens Spanish possessions. France remains a constant rival, skirmishing along contested borders. England's navy harasses treasure fleets. The politics of the Holy Roman Empire demand Spanish intervention and Spanish gold. Philip isn't fighting one war, he's fighting 6. The army of Flanders alone costs 300,000 ducats every single month, just to maintain it. Not to expand, not to launch offensives, simply to keep soldiers fed, armed, and in position. Multiply that across multiple fronts and the numbers become obscene. So Philip borrows from German Fugger bankers who financed his father, from Italian Genoese bankers who specialize in lending to monarchs, from anyone willing to extend credit to the richest empire on earth. And the collateral is elegant in its simplicity: future treasure fleets, the silver that hasn't left Potosí yet, the gold still being mined in New Spain. Spain borrows against 1575's treasure in 1572. When the 1575 fleet arrives, the silver is already spent, already claimed by creditors. So Spain borrows against the 1576 fleet to pay the 1575 loans, then borrows against 1577 to pay 1576. The interest rates are brutal: 14% annually, 16%, 18% on the riskiest loans. Each treasure fleet arrives pre-spent 2 years in advance, sometimes 3. The silver flows directly from Seville harbour to Italian banks without ever entering the Spanish economy. And then 1557, barely a year into Philip's reign, Spain suspends all debt payments. Every loan, every bond, every obligation stopped. This is bankruptcy number 1 under Philip. He restructures everything into long-term bonds called juros, essentially converting short-term disaster into long-term catastrophe. The interest payments immediately consume 40% of royal revenue. 40% of everything Spain collects goes to servicing debt before a single soldier is paid. Brief recovery, more borrowing, more wars, and 1560, bankruptcy number 2. Same process, suspend payments, restructure. The interest burden climbs higher. Then 1575. This bankruptcy is different. This one breaks something fundamental. The army of Flanders hasn't been paid in months. Soldiers who fought for Spain, bled for Spain, watch treasure fleets arrive in Seville while their wages never come. And in November 1576, Spanish soldiers mutiny and sack Antwerp, the Spanish Fury it's called. 3 days of rampage through one of the richest cities in Europe. 7,000 civilians killed, the city burned, and the Netherlands, already in revolt, are now permanently, irrevocably alienated. The richest provinces of Philip's empire will never be recovered because Spain couldn't pay its own army. Philip's response is to start new wars. Still bankrupt, still unable to pay existing soldiers, he launches the Spanish Armada against England in 1588. A fleet of 130 ships carrying 30,000 men. It fails catastrophically. Storms and English fireships scatter the Armada. Less than half the ships return. The cost is staggering. The debt climbs higher. And Philip, sitting in the Escorial, continues to believe God will provide, while borrowing at 18% interest against silver that's already been borrowed against twice. One more bankruptcy is coming under Philip's reign, but Spain isn't done yet, not even close. ACT 5. Spain enters the 1600s with 80 years of treasure behind it, 4 bankruptcies in the ledger and wars still burning on every front. The silver keeps arriving, the fleets still cross the Atlantic, still unload their tons of precious metal onto Seville's docks, but something fundamental has broken in the Spanish economy. This is stage 4, the population collapse. The numbers tell a story of demographic catastrophe. Castile, the heart of Spain, counts 6.6 million people in 1590. By 1650, that number is 5.2 million, a 21% decline in 60 years. Not from plague this time, not from war casualties, but from economic disintegration so complete that people simply abandon their land. More than 800 villages in Castile alone become ghost towns. Fields go unploughed. Farmhouses collapse into ruins. The countryside empties while Madrid swells with people who have nowhere else to go. The mechanism is mathematical. Farming doesn't pay because inflation has destroyed profitability. A farmer plants wheat, harvests wheat, brings it to market, and discovers French wheat sells for less even after shipping costs. Manufacturing doesn't pay because workshops can't compete with Dutch or German producers working in economies where costs haven't exploded. The only remaining options are the military, the church, government positions, or begging. By 1630, 1 in every 10 Spanish men has taken religious orders, not from piety, from economics. The silver production peaks in the 1590s at 270 tons annually, then begins declining. The mines at Potosí are depleting. Deeper shafts require more labor and produce less ore. The indigenous population in the Americas has collapsed from European diseases, leaving fewer workers to extract the silver Spain's entire economy now depends upon. The treasure that was supposed to flow forever is running out. And Philip II, in 1596, declares bankruptcy for the 4th time. Interest payments now consume 70% of royal revenue. 70%. Even the treasure fleets can't cover debt service anymore. The silver belongs to creditors before it leaves the Americas. Philip dies in 1598. His son Philip III inherits an empire still vast on maps, but rotting in practice. The wars continue because stopping them means admitting defeat. The Netherlands are effectively independent by 1609, though Spain won't officially acknowledge it for decades. The 30 Years' War begins in 1618, and Spain exhausts itself fighting Protestant forces across Central Europe. The Spanish army that once dominated European battlefields is humiliated at Rocroi in 1643. The myth of Spanish military invincibility dies in a single afternoon. Portugal, ruled by Spain since 1580, rebels in 1640, and wins its independence after 28 years of war. Spain can't afford to fight. Bankruptcy number 5 arrives in 1607. Philip III suspends payments, restructures, and the cycle continues. Bankruptcy number 6 in 1627 under Philip IV. Bankruptcy number 7 in 1647. The rhythm accelerates. 4 bankruptcies in 90 years becomes 7 total. The system isn't just failing anymore, it's convulsing. By 1700, Spain is irrelevant, not declining. Irrelevant. France dominates European politics. England controls the seas. The Dutch Republic has become the financial center of the world. The Spanish Empire still exists on paper, still controls vast territories in the Americas, but exercises no real power. The treasure galleons still arrive in Seville, but the silver transfers immediately to Italian and German banks before a single coin circulates in the Spanish economy. Spain became a delivery service for its own treasure. The wealth that was supposed to make them invincible made them irrelevant instead. Spain's collapse followed a 4-stage pattern of economic suicide. Stage 1 was the production collapse. Treasure destroyed the incentive to work. Why weave cloth when you can buy French textiles with Peruvian silver? Why forge steel when German weapons cost less? The silver made production seem unnecessary, and Spain's economy hollowed out while everyone believed they were getting richer. Stage 2 was the price revolution. Inflation made Spain the most expensive economy in Europe. Too much silver chasing too few Spanish-made goods. Prices quadrupled in a century, while the rest of Europe experienced half the inflation. Spanish products became uncompetitive, and the silver that was supposed to be wealth became the mechanism of impoverishment. Stage 3 was the debt trap, borrowing against future treasure fleets that were already borrowed against. 7 bankruptcies in 150 years, interest payments consuming 70% of revenue. The treasure belonged to creditors before it left the mines. And stage 4 was the population collapse. 21% demographic decline as people abandoned an economy that couldn't support them anymore. 800 villages turned to ruins because there was no economic reason to stay. Here's the lesson that destroyed Spain and echoes through history to today. Wealth is not money. Wealth is production. Spain had more money than any empire in human history and became poorer every year because they stopped producing and started importing everything. The Netherlands took Spanish silver and built workshops, shipyards, banks, and became the richest nation in Europe. Spain took the same silver and bought what the Netherlands made. One created wealth, one created dependency. The modern world has seen this pattern repeat. Venezuela has more oil reserves than Saudi Arabia and can't afford to import gasoline. The resource curse isn't theoretical. It's Spain with oil instead of silver. Countries that print currency while production collapses discover that money without goods is just inflation with extra steps. Nations that borrow against future resource revenues find the same debt trap that swallowed Philip II. Spain's treasure seemed like a cheat code. Unlimited resources, infinite wealth, the ability to buy everything without producing anything. But economics has no cheat codes. The Spanish Empire learned this across 7 bankruptcies and 200 years of decline. They believed treasure made them immune to economic laws. They believed wealth could be imported rather than created. They believed future revenues guaranteed present spending. They were wrong about all 3. And it destroyed them. Because the treasure that killed Spain wasn't the gold and silver. It was the illusion that wealth can exist without production.